Thank you all for being here again after our little break. That break was 10 minutes instead of 5 minutes. That is good because we need some energy for this morning. For the next 1.5 hours, we will be digging deeper into various projects done by 6 unique theaters and artists who are, not like yesterday, that were all case studies done by the members of the Play network, but today these creators are not part of the Play On network and show us what's out there. I would like to start by sharing how thrilled I am about the theater performance by the Burgtheater in Vienna. Tonight at 8 p.m. CET, it will be live on Twitter. Sebastian Huber and Philipp Haus, our 2 next speakers, were highly involved in its development, together with Anna Aschenbrenner, who is responsible for the digital strategy of the Burgtheater. Sebastian Huber studied German and theater studies from Freiburg and Munich in southern Germany. He worked as dramaturg in leading positions at some of the biggest and most renowned theaters in Germany and Austria. He is now back since 2019, I think, at the Burgtheater. Philipp Haus is an award-winning actor, director, and ensemble member at the Burgtheater since 2002. Welcome you both with a warm heart. The stage is yours.
Hello. Let me start. Can you hear me, first of all? Maybe
yes.
Not. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for having us, and good morning from Vienna. We are, Sebastian and I are gonna share the talk, so I'll do the first few minutes. There was the reference earlier on to tankers, like big theaters, tankers, and it is true that they do not necessarily move quick, and they do not necessarily move at all. But as a lot of German-speaking theaters will probably have the same issue, the same situation. The genesis of the digital formats in our theater had very much to do with the moment of crisis, especially Corona and the lockdown, which especially put actors in a position that you were not able to perform your job, which is not thinking a hydraulic system of necessarily a need to express or a passion which has to come out, but it was more also a moment of worry and a moment of questioning, like, if this direct theater does not work at the moment, or maybe for longer, how can we still communicate with our audience? And so we were forced, and that is basically the genesis of digital or social media, digital work at the Burgtheater. We were forced into creating formats where we as actors could communicate with an audience and generate a relevance in the city, in the society, because our main stage was forced to be closed at that time. And it took, and I'm talking from an actor's perspective, it took a long time, or in the beginning it was kind of a worry how to manage this shift from the analog to the digital. And one crucial point was to understand that this is not 2 modes of playing or 2 modes of theater in competition, but actually that they both require very, very special forms of playing, of acting. And it is also not the case that you could just switch to a film or TV style acting. No, this digital format did require a very special form of acting, of talking directly to the audience, of an openness towards the media. But also it created a new form of authorship, of deciding or deciding aesthetically how you want a format to be understood, how you want to communicate. And so in a way, it took away from the actors a lot of the freedom, especially the freedom of movement, the freedom to be on stage, the freedom to perform live. But at the same time, actors and all artists within the theater gained a form of authorship, a form of being able to create your own pieces. And Yeah, so especially with more traditional, more conservative ensemble members, it was always a big discussion that they say, like, this is not my job, sitting in front of a little camera and reading something out or talking. But over time, I think the acquaintance with the media was actually something that took a form of habituation, but now is at a point where those two formats, analog and digital, stand in a way next to each other. And yeah, I would like to close my part with a note from the German media philosopher Friedrich Kittler, who says that new media do not necessarily displace old media, but they assign neue Systemplätze, new system places to other media. So I would understand that even for big, in a way, conservative, slow-moving tankers like the Burgtheater, this digital challenge, the challenge to invent other formats, does also reflect back on the analog theater world and kind of helps, maybe even helps to create a new identity of analog, in a way, traditional theater work, which does not, which kind of, it develops a positive identity and does not feel that it is kind of the lame duck within the new arena of different media. So I think now Sebastian will talk more about what formats we actually did invent. So thank you very much for this part.
Thank you, Philip. As you said, the Corona crisis caught us on the wrong foot, and even more so because we were in the first year of or the first season of the new artistic director in charge at the Burgtheater. So we were not really very well acquainted with all the circumstances in this theater and about the capacities. One of the and we weren't really a very digital theater at the time. One thing we decided very early was not to go for streaming of performances, as well for practical reasons as well as for aesthetic reasons. We couldn't do it in the first lockdown for obvious reasons, and in the second lockdown we decided to focus on rehearsing new performances instead of streaming existing ones that had also to do with a very frightening rhythm of 2 weeks prolongations of the Corona measures. So we were told always to be prepared to start playing on stage again, and this wasn't ideal for a long-term strategy. So the first thing we did in the first lockdown was to commission monologues by some 20 Austrian authors, playwrights, as well as novelists, as well as songwriters, for one member of our ensemble each, and those were filmed in the apartments of the ensemble members by a team of 2. So that was the maximum to comply with the regulations that existed at the time. That was pretty successful. People liked to watch that, and we had some really aesthetically satisfying, or at least interesting, results, and were nominated for a National Theatre Award with this program. So that was for a team that sort of didn't really exist. It was quite a good start. The second thing I want to point at was a Viennese edition of a production called To Be a Machine by a British-English theatre duo Dead Center, conceived originally for the Dublin Theatre Festival. It had one actor on stage, analog, in front of a virtual audience. So on each of the seats in the audience, there was a tablet, and Michael Mertens was acting in front of, for a camera, in front of this mechanical audience. People watched it on their screens at home, and when they bought their tickets, they were asked to do little camera recordings of themselves, in order to sort of provide the audience for the show. The show To Be a Machine was based on a book by Mark O'Connell of the same title, which deals with transhumanism, and the production played very smart and beautiful tricks on notions of reality, virtuality, identity, which sort of combined very well with the topic of the book and the performance. Then we invented some formats that are sort of developed from outreach programs that we had in our theater, but went really well in digital media, in parts a lot better than the original analog formats did. One I want to point at is a series of talks on Insta Live, accompanying a production which focuses on the work of philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Philip had a huge part not only in the analog performance, but also in developing these talks, which were a lot more mobile than the talks would have been if they had been, I don't know, in an analog way. And then also in the first lockdown, we some of these formats, as I said, we keep now that even now that restrictions are over, and because they really were successful and did well. And then we invented Twitter theater from scratch, really, in the first lockdown, without even knowing much about the media involved, as far as I'm concerned anyway. And the idea was very simple. We said shows in theater do not mainly take place on stage, but in the brains and the hearts and all the other organs of audiences and in their imagination. So why not, if we're not able to show a performance, why not sort of imagine a complete performance together with, you cannot even call them audiences anymore, but with all the participants of a night in a theater. We called it Vorstellungsänderung, the first edition, which at the same time is the term when we have to change the program on a night. and play a different piece than we originally published. And at the same time, it means changing of imagination or changing of concept. It was, we started by publishing a small text announcing a piece like we do in our analog programs, like those that we print. But of course, the piece never existed. We just chose a genre and a very rough story or situation.
Sebastian, hi,
yeah.
This is Paula from the background, your host today. We are really sorry, but we are running a little bit out of time.
Okay,
maybe you can wrap up by just giving, because we'll see this theater tonight, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can just give us just in one sentence a heads up what we can experience tonight and what we can look forward to.
Yeah, okay. What we did was, after that, we did a mini series of 4 performances before Christmas and a Twitter radio theater in cooperation with the nationwide radio channel. So what we will, and now we were invited to do an international guest performance by this conference and by Play On. So what we will do tonight is we will have a guest performance at the Berliner Ensemble in Berlin and at Elektrotheater in Krakow.
Yeah, I already announced it because we are so excited to have that.
And what will happen completely depends on you or on all the participants. We give you another genre that is not very often done on theater stages. This time it's the Lehrstück.
I already want our audience that they should create a Twitter account and be as creative as they can.
Yeah, maybe just to quickly.
I'm so sorry, our time is up and we need to give some time to the other speakers.
Oh, okay. No, I just meant to, it is basically an improvisation tonight, and there's no line between participants and actors. So it's a very big community, and we invite everybody to take part.
Yeah, that's a good end. So please be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you. And now I'm thrilled to announce my next speaker, Tina Lorenz of the State Theatre of Augsburg in Germany. The State Theatre is exploring avenues for virtual reality and theatre to go together. You can book a ticket, for example, for a pre-recorded VR theatre show and receive a virtual reality headset, which is sent to your home. I'm really excited about it because I tried it myself a couple months ago. What I experienced was exciting, entertaining, and it had meaningful interactions influencing the story, something I hadn't expected at all. So that was super innovative. And that is only one example of many ideas that the State Theatre of Augsburg has expanded upon during the last 2 years. At the moment, they are working on something they call Elektrotheater, a social VR stage or platform, we can say, I think. Tina Lorenz is the brain behind these innovations as a project lead for digital development since 2020. She says of herself that she came of age in a galactic society of hackers. She is a dramaturge, founder of 2 hack spaces, not only one would be boring, speaker and author, and an expert on digital opportunities for theaters. So welcome, Tina. I'm really eager to hear more on this.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I did bring a presentation which I will try to share with you. If that's not working, no worries, I can still talk. But you should be able to see that, so I can give you a bit of visual input what the State Theatre of Augsburg is doing. What we are doing is we're playing in VR, which means that we're doing a couple of very different things. We started before the pandemic. We started in 2019 when Andre Bücke, who is the artistic director of the State Theatre of Augsburg, had the idea to combine live opera with VR. And the result was Orfeo at Eurydice, which is an opera where large parts play in the underworld, and this is always really hard to show. So what we did was we bought, with the help of sponsors and partners, we bought over 500 VR headsets, and we put them under the seats of our opera house, because we are not in our house, we are in the interim. We have temporary opera house and a temporary play stage, because our house is being renovated right now. So our opera house is a warehouse that we kind of repurposed, and we put VR headsets under each of the seats. So you had a live performance with singers and an orchestra and a conductor and whatever you imagine a live opera performance would be. But then when we went to the underworld, we actually put on the VR headsets together, and we experienced rendered VR a rendered VR experience to kind of enlarge the stage and enlarge the performing space. This was really interesting, and it was supposed to premiere in May 2020. Then the pandemic hit, the first lockdown hit, and we had 500 VR headsets. So we asked ourselves, what can we do to connect with our audiences who were stuck at home? So what we did then was develop a kind of plan to bring the headsets to our audiences. And we did that with another technique, with a 360-degree video. This is a different technique from rendered VR, because you use a camera that has 8 lenses, and that's filming in whole immersive space. And you stitch it together in post-production. And then when you put on the VR headsets, you have a very true representation, a filmic representation of a space, but you feel the immersion, you have presence, you really feel that you're sharing the room. And we now have, I think, 9 or 10 productions. We rent them out to the people at home still, because in the first lockdown we had our front of house staff bring them to our audience, which was really nice connecting factor, because, you know, our audience and the front of house staff, they know each other. And right now you can rent a headset in Augsburg via bike courier. They bring the headset to you and they collect it again. And you can also, if you're in Austria or Germany, you can rent them as well. It comes by a package, postal package. We have 2 productions that are not only immersive but also interactive, because we try to enlarge what it means to interact with these experiences, because as I said before, you have presence but not co-presence, you're alone in the experience, but there is a bit of interaction. We have a detective story and we have an interactive concert, for example, where you can be present right in the middle of the concert and be really immersed in the music. We used ambisonic sound, so you can tilt your head and just experience the sound as it would be at the exact space where you're standing, and you can select 4 places to stand within the audience, within the orchestra itself. We did that, and then we said, well, we need co-presence, because the theater is for us, it's about liveness and it's about co-presence. And we secured a large grant to do that from the Kulturstiftung des Bundes. I'm very, very grateful that we had the opportunity to do that. And we developed the Elektrotheater. And what the Elektrotheater is a SocialVR experience, and it's an infrastructure. It's built for our VR headsets because we had so many, and we needed to use them and needed to be able to use them for longer times. And they are not the newest model, and they can't really do what the newest models can, but they still can do a lot. And so we started out as thinking about what theater is. What theater is if you take away the architecture. Because when you take away the architecture, you have the mechanics of theater. And we kind of developed what the infrastructure would look like in the first stage, and the second stage was building it. And we used an artist technology team to develop that, because they would kind of, if they didn't understand something or they didn't like something, they would really be honest about that and not just do what I said because I was paying the bills. So that was really something that I liked, because it kind of honed the whole idea, the whole project. And we did extensive play testing with all generations, because what we like to do is have it really that the technology, which most people have not experienced before, isn't supposed to be a barrier to the experience. I know that theater itself is a barrier, because it's usually in those huge houses. They look like palaces. They are not they're not inviting for a lot of people, and technology can present the same barrier, only in a different way. And so we play tested our infrastructure, and we redesigned a lot of things after the playtest, especially with the older people. We had people that were holding the controller wrong because they never had a game pad or game controller of any kind in their hand. And so we needed to redesign a lot of things after the playtest. And the last bit that we did was artistic exploration, and we invited 4 artist groups. One of them is here today, Ricardo and Susanne, together with Sarah Buser. Out of the Box was one of the 4 artistic groups that we invited to explore the infrastructure and find out if they can use it, if it's worthy of telling stories within it. And it was a first try. And I really liked how different the scenes were that were developed. And what we did in the Elektrotheater, we thought about what theater means to us. And we think, or we developed it around the roles of the participants. There is an audience who experiences theater for the first time. For them, everything is how it's supposed to be. Even if something goes terribly wrong, it's always belonging to the piece. It's magic. And so we designed a faceless avatar for them, which is not cannot speak and has a bit of interaction, but little, because what we thought was distracting when the people were talking, or if the people talked, it would be distracting for the story, because it's visually and acoustically so overwhelming that you needed some sort of hindrance to the chaos. At least that's what we thought. They can move, they can pick up stuff, they can throw stuff, they can touch stuff, and they have one hand, because our VR headsets only had one controller with them, so they can only use one hand. And there is the role of technician. He or she looks like the audience, but has access to hidden menus, can trigger different levels and change scenes, and can trigger audio or video or whatever is built in the scenes, and they can see that, the audience can't. And then there's the third role, which is that of the actor, that has a more sophisticated avatar. We use a different headset for that. We use a 6DOF headset, which means that you can actually play, you can be in a room and move around, and at the same time move around in the virtual space. And this is the avatar that has speech. Right, so why are we doing it? And I think what is really important for me is that theater itself has always thought that the digital would be really take a vast curve around it. Theater was always the last palace of the analog, and that's what theater has been. And the social web, the Web 2.0, is something that really redefined public space, as in we don't have any. anymore. It's a commercial space controlled by private organizations, and there's you have a few platforms where everybody is a user, and we are a user. And if we do something that is against the user agreements, then we get banned, which is interesting for people, but for artistic institutions, it doesn't have any artistic freedom. If you show nudity, if you do something that in any way goes against these usage agreements, then you cannot participate anymore. So this is really something that we missed, that we didn't fight for 15, 20 years ago, because we thought this was not a public space that theater was supposed to be in. I think that has shifted. And I think it is really important that we right now, with the whole talk of Web3 and what Antonio said earlier, is that we fight for that space, and that we explore social VR spaces and explore that, what we call the metaverse or whatever it is, because then we are visible, and visibility means that we articulate our needs, which is artistic freedom grounded on democratic principles, and that we don't miss the opportunity that we missed in the social web. And I think I'm done. Cool, I hope that was 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tina. That was very interesting. And it was always a manifesto for artists to dig into virtual and digital world. So thank you for that. I have to do a little announcement for everybody who can hear us now. Our link, reaction link at the platform is quite shaky, let's say, and you might have problems to see and hear us. But what's really working well is the stream on our website, on the Play On website. We stream everything live there. If you have problems in reaction link, go to the website and follow us there. I hope you can see us now. There are questions you can send us. It's an email address. I hope you can have something to write. It's hope@playon.eu. hope@playon.eu. You can ask us questions. You can also probably ask questions on social media. So if you want to participate, maybe you just use Twitter or Facebook or so on, but mostly follow the stream on the website. So my next speaker is she will tell us about very, very interesting projects, and not only one, a couple. Some of you in the audience who joined us last year may remember keynote speaker Guy Getney. He had talked about a digital play named Alice, a virtual reality theme park. Well, the theater behind this production was the Creation Theatre company from Oxford. Before the pandemic, Creation were known for the inventive adaptations of classic texts in unusual locations in the UK. Over 500,000 people have appreciated their work. Because of COVID, they changed their focus to digitizing and quickly became leaders of the digital theatre world. Over the past 2 years, they produced no less than 13 digital shows using all kinds of innovative technology, like AI characters, gaming tech, and branching video. I'm thrilled to invite Chief Executive and Creative Producer Lucy Askew to enlighten us today about their transformation. Thank you so much for being here, Lucy.
Hello, thank you for having me. Apologies that my lighting is making me ridiculously pink this morning. I don't have a pink light on. If you were in the room with me now, you see lots of natural daylight and white light, but the joys of Zoom. And one thing I don't have time to talk about today, but one of the things we found through doing 13 shows is that actually Zoom can change people's skin tone quite a lot, which in some situations doesn't matter, but actually in some pieces of work can cause some really quite upsetting results. So we now have built our own platform that I may get to talk about very briefly. So we are a Creation Theatre company. We are based in Oxfordshire. I'm going to simultaneously put a timer on here so I can keep an eye on how long I'm chatting for. So we're an Oxford-based company, and we are traditionally known for site-specific work. So for 24 years, we've been doing Shakespeare and classic texts in college gardens, on rooftops, in factories, on industrial estates. We've done a lot of work with game theatre. So the slide I'm showing at the moment was a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, where the audience discovered the story in 13 different locations around the city. So not promenade theatre, not static theatre, you are in small groups and you are uncovering the story as you go. We've done work in shopping centres. This is a production of Brave New World that took place in a brand new shopping centre in the centre of Oxford, the Westgate Centre. We increasingly, pre-pandemic, we were sort of starting to build more and more technology and more video work and projection work into our shows. So Brave New World, for example, had this enormous video screen. It had CCTV cameras around the shopping centre, and our cast were radio mic'd and our audience had wireless headphones on. So that allowed very intimate conversations to be viewed in the distance and heard very clearly by an audience, but also meant that shoppers could simultaneously be moving around the space and become a kind of unwitting ambient extras and set to what was going on. And if you're familiar with Brave New World, you'll understand that has a particular significance to the story and to the kind of sort of focus on consumerism and the future. We had taken a similar approach with a production we did of 1984, which happened to be on in the February just after Trump was voted in as president, and sold to 94% in 2 weeks because everyone was suddenly very interested in Orwellian stories. So we took a similar approach of having multiple screens, sort of a sea of screens and CCTV cameras, and we had actors with that manipulating webcams so that we could use areas of the building that would not be, you couldn't fit a whole audience into, and this idea of seeing a sort of hybrid experience that was partly on a screen and partly live in front of an audience. But that was all pre-pandemic, and we, you know, at that point we sort of thought we were doing digital. We thought we were quite good at digital, and really we had no idea the potential for what digital could really be. So when the pandemic started in the UK, within 3 weeks of the first lockdown, we did our first fully digital performance, which was a production of The Tempest. We made this as a co-production with an incredible company called Big Telly, who are based in Northern Ireland, who are worth looking up. Zoe Seaton, their director, is an absolute genius and visionary. And we really, as soon as we were locked down, worked with Zoe going, what can we do? And we both had some actors who were under contract, who we were determined to keep employing and paying. And we just played. We just got them in a room with Zoe and started playing and working out what we could do. We did a bit of a beauty parade of different conferencing platforms that were available, and we settled on Zoom. So we made our first piece of Zoom theatre. And at this stage, all our performers were in total lockdown. So they were in their own homes. They had very limited equipment. They had whatever laptops or computers or webcams or microphones that they happened to own themselves. We had no green screens. We had no complicated software. It was entirely just playing with what was available within Zoom. Some of our performers had the ability to use virtual backgrounds. So a lot of it was done really playfully playing with virtual backgrounds. Some of them didn't. So some of them we had to send projectors to so that we could create an immersive world. But the really key reason that it was within Zoom was a really important thing for us at that stage was about the liveness and that co-presence of an audience with our performers, and that theatre being about that sharing and that feeling that this is happening at this moment in time and we are sharing it together. So Zoe and the cast came up with some really fun, playful, creative ways to capitalise on that. So I'm just going to show you a little short clip of The Tempest now.
Elements to magic up a storm. Give me thy hands. Please, give me thy hands. All of ye. And now, do as I do.
Is that playing? Or
hands together for light soft rain.
Yeah, I think the picture's frozen.
Clicks
well, we'll move on. You can
raindrops.
hear. I'll skip on that one. Yeah, I'll skip on to the next one. We'll see if the next video will play. So what you could hear there, if you were able to here was that they did lots of work with, like, the audience had to click to make the sound of the rain, and they had to rub their hands together to make the sound of like heavier rain. They had to like bang to do the sound of thunder. And because it was within Zoom, the audience were then spotlighted. So it was this really incredible emotional moment at the start of the pandemic where people weren't seeing friends and family, and people were feeling very, very isolated, and they came together and saw this show, and their liveness and their interaction was feeding into the performance, but also they could be seen. And there was a bit where they all held up their dogs and pets, and, you know, it became this really joyful, amazing experience. And for us in that moment, we went from being a really small local Oxford company to having an international audience. We were reported in the New York Times, Time Out New York. We were on BBC Front Row in the UK. We got a 4-star review in The Guardian, and we started to see this international audience grow, and people started to use our work as a way to connect with friends and family who were outside of the UK. So our next show is The Time Machine. I've got a video clip here, so we'll see if this is going to work. And The Time Machine was the show we were doing when lockdown started. Again, we created it in Zoom. We used virtual backgrounds. We pushed slightly further on our immersive worlds this time, and sort of would daisy chain virtual backgrounds so that you could have a performer walk down a corridor, and then by changing the background, the doors would open, and by changing the background again, they would be in a different room. So it was a really sort of low tech, really accessible, no one needs a big budget way to create a show. The Time Machine, really interestingly as well, and one of the reasons that creation pivoted really quickly and actually has embraced digital so comprehensively over the pandemic, is that we were working on this show before the pandemic started with researchers from the Wellcome Centre of Ethics and Humanities, and they were telling us there is going to be a pandemic, it's going to happen, and millions of people are going to die, and it's going to be spread by air travel. It will be a SARS-like pandemic, and then there'll be loads of politics about vaccine distribution and inequality, and New Zealand will be the only place that's relatively unaffected. So we were looking at that material in October 2019. So when it started to happen, as well as a slightly guilty feeling that somehow we'd made it happen, we were really not thinking this is going to last 2 weeks. We knew that we were in this for the long haul. So let's see if this is going to work to play a bit of The Time Machine.
What I need is to know what time must I go to in order
that one's
to head
feeding
off
too. I'll
this
move on.
disaster.
We'll skip the video clips, and then if there's time at the end, or if anyone wants to see them in the chat, we can share them a different way. Then we went on to Alice, where we worked with Guy Gadney at Charisma AI, who spoke last year. And with Alice, we really pulled apart the Zoom call. So we started to find that as a theatre company, we could get these tech partnerships and we could get tech funding. So we were funded by Innovate UK. And with this, Charisma helped us take the Zoom call, pull it apart, and have the tiles floating so that we could literally make our audience fall down the rabbit hole. They then went to an interactive website where they could choose their own, navigate their own route through the story. So we conceived it being like a virtual theme park was the idea. So as a family, you could choose to see the Red Queen multiple times. If that was what your kids were enjoying, you could go and see the White Rabbit again and again if that's what you wanted to do, or you could do different things each time. We also worked with a company called Fox Dog Studio, who created an integration where at one point you were instructed to get your phone out and go to a website, and you drew a hedgehog, and then the whole audience hedgehogs were racing in a croquet game on the screen. So you all came together in this just absolutely bonkers mad competitive hedgehog race. So we'll skip through the trailer for that one. And then we sort of we've so comprehensively fallen in love with the digital work that by this point we secured funding to have a digital rep company for 6 months. So we worked with a team of actors for 6 months and made another 4 pieces of work exclusively working digitally. And one of the things that we sort of learned as a side effect, that we sort of suspected to begin with, but we did some sort of further reporting and analysis on, was the huge sustainability benefits of digital work. So we've shown, we looked at Brothers Grimm, Tales of Grim Times and Fragile Broken People, that this is a shot of you have on the slide here. We used this as a case study and we compared it to an analogue show and discovered that there's a 98.9% reduction in carbon emissions with digital work, really because we're reducing audience travel. And, you know, it's quite a radical proposition to say, maybe the thing we're doing that's worse for the environment is building sets and encouraging people to travel to see our work. And the scope for digital work to give us a really substantial reduction and a way forward to connect with people, to share stories, to have a live moment in time without those kind of negative environmental downsides is huge. With Grim Tales, we took a different approach. So rather than using virtual backgrounds to create our little worlds, we actually sent each of our performers their own mini sets. So this is one of the model boxes for them. So again, we were in extreme lockdown at this time, but each of our performers we built them these little boxes, and then they were driven around the UK and delivered. Our performers all over the UK at this point delivered to their houses, and they then performed from within these little boxes. So for us, it was about taking, how can we miniaturize the impact of what we're building, but how can we sort of play in a different way with our audience? And with this as well, we would have multiple camera angles positioned around the set. This also sort of coincided with a point where we started to find that the early work had a lot of audience interaction, a lot of audience with cameras on, the clicking, the clapping on Tempest. And we started to see a shift in how our audiences wanted to interact with the digital work. So we started to find that, like with this, it was a more gentle interaction. So rather than actually being spotlighted or seen on screen, our audience just watched the show, and at the end were invited to turn their cameras on and light a candle. So it had this really beautiful, poignant moment at the end. But people were starting with so many Zoom calls during the day, so much time online during the day. They wanted liveness, but they were moving away from wanting to be seen. So with some of our future work, we moved on to working with AI characters, and we did a production of Romeo and Juliet, which you'll see on my background this is the branching video map for Romeo and Juliet. So we did an interactive branching video for the second half of it, where you could save Romeo and Juliet. You could go through and choose which story choice you wanted. And our brilliant director, Natasha, incorporated different bits of Shakespeare to make those multiple narratives. Because we've continued to really try and sort of push that. What is liveness? What do the audience really gain out of the digital experience? Because we see it having so many benefits, but that critically for us, we call it digital theatre for want of a better term, but we really believe that this is a medium that is as much TV and interactive TV and film and gaming, and it's about a convergence of all these different mediums and creating a totally new medium and a totally new language and totally new types of interactions with audience, and that for us at the moment are largely rooted in liveness, but actually that liveness or interactivity are dials that we're constantly playing with. And I will stop my presentation there to keep on time.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was really, really interesting. I think like you see from our case studies here, not all are virtual augmented reality projects. Some are digital on a 2D screen, but the red line between all of them, I think, is the aspect of interactivity, the aspect of co-creation, the live aspect that the audiences feels what they're doing is somehow crucial for the story. And I think that's also one of the big advantages from theater and theater people can bring. Yeah, just asking to Michael. Yeah, here I am. Okay, perfect. So our next speakers are from Germany, and they seem to be the perfect combination of talents. Ricardo Gehn is a media artist and software developer, while Susanne Schuster is a dramaturge. Together, they formed the independent media and performance group Out of the Box. With the help of their self-developed software and hardware, they can create truly immersive experiences for their audience. Always substantial for them, and here we go again to the red line: collaboration, audience, co-creation, and interaction. Today, they present their recent work, an augmented reality installation called Community-Driven, a Smart City Generator. And I have to say, wow, that's our first augmented reality production today. I'm very, very excited to learn about it. So please welcome Susanne and Ricardo.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us here. Yeah, we're happy to present our work now. And there is already, we have a presentation we will show you. And in our talk, we're going to share some learnings we had during our work on designing usability for community-driven. But before we get too much into the details of augmented reality, I'm going to introduce us a little bit. So as you heard, we are Ricardo and Susanna. We are media collective working on experiences, on performative spaces, and be somewhere between performance media art and game design, mainly in the independent performing art scene. And as you have heard already, our work is characterized by developing software and hardware which enables participation. And also, in the development of our applications, it is usually preceded by a participatory research process in which we collect documentary interview material and later integrate it into our software. And we are only two, but we often collaborate with other artists, and such as also in the project community-driven. So I'm just going to name them shortly because they're an important part of the project as well. In software development, we collaborated with the artist Sarah Buser and Anton Krause, and in research and dramaturgy with the producer Merle Mühlhausen. And now we're going to talk about this project and share with you our experiences regarding usability and interaction design. But first, a couple of words to the project's topics. With community-driven, we are discussing the future of the city. So like everything else, the city of today is supposed to become smarter. However, these decisions about smart cities how they should look like are often made by digital companies, governments, or urban planning offices. And so that's why we invited citizens of 3 German cities to rethink technologies for community life in this project. So to us, it's important to use technology also to break down hierarchies, and as artists not to assume exclusive authorship, but to enable participation and multi-voice perspectives on the issues we are addressing. And this is also important in the development process. So therefore, before the development of the AR application, we had a big research process in which we held interviews together with Katrin Fritsch from the think tank Motive Institute for Digital Culture. And in these workshops, we collected visions of citizens about the smart city. And these interviews were in the augmented reality installation, and we're going to show you a short trailer so that you have an insight on how the installation looked. Unfortunately, this project was released in February and March only, so we only have a trailer in German so far. I'm really sorry about that, but the trailer is mainly meant to convey the setting and the interaction of the participants with the AR app. And for those who don't speak German, the voices you will be hearing in the trailer are the documentary interview footage. So you can hear speculative descriptions of cities, including the role of data and surveillance, mobility in public spaces, waste disposal, green spaces, such ideas the citizens of the workshops had. So Michael, I would ask you please to close the presentation and play the trailer. Only 2 minutes, that's enough to get them inside.
Eine smarte Stadt ist für mich eine gerechte und auch eine grüne Stadt.
I think we can still see the presentation, not the trailer.
Manchmal erinnerst du dich an deine Großeltern, wie sie dir vom Leben in der Stadt erzählt haben. Überall war es laut und schmutzig. Auf sehr engem Raum lebten unzählige Menschen, verbrauchten Ressourcen und Energie, produzierten Abgase und Tonnen an Müll. Seit der flächendeckenden Datenerhebung hat sich das Ökosystem Stadt grundlegend verändert. Deine Stadt reguliert sich und ihre Ressourcen selbst. Dank KI-Steuerung regeln sich die Verkehrsströme von alleine und reagieren flexibel auf Probleme.
Wenn man jetzt ganz groß denkt, würde ich mir wünschen, dass der öffentliche Nahverkehr niedrigschwelliger gestaltet wird und die Motivation der Menschen, ihre privaten Autos abzuschaffen, einfach so groß wird, dass es weniger Individualverkehr in der Stadt gibt.
Sensoren in Mülltonnendeckeln ermitteln die Füllmenge und planen einen sparsamen und effizienten Abholrhythmus.
Wenn der Müll immer gleich weg ist und immer alles gleich schön aussieht, bemerken wir dann eigentlich noch, wie viel Müll wir produzieren.
Wenn deine Waschmaschine kaputt ist oder du dir eine Bohrmaschine ausleihen musst, du weißt genau, wo du Hilfe findest. Heute kannst du alles über eine App erledigen. Du lebst in einer Stadt, in der smartes Teilen bereits flächendeckend praktiziert wird.
Sichtbarkeit wird deine Entscheidung.
Das ist sozusagen die Horrorvorstellung, die mir
Yeah, well, so this is the installation and how it looked like, and now we're gonna share some insights about the production process. I'm gonna click the next slide. So we were working in 3 phases. We call it iterations, and you can see in the first phase we had the prototyping, and we went into this phase with the material from the workshops and the interviews, and we, the idea was to develop an augmented reality app in which one can discover the collected visions on so-called islands, which means on marketplace 3D content. The idea was to have also the audience to connect them via the installation with each other, which means if they have listened to a similar content, they should get into a conversation by using the app's functions. So they were asked to have a conversation. And another feature we wanted to implement was that the people who visited the installation could record their own visions via the app. This feature was also implemented when they had listened to a certain content and they were asked to record it via the microphone in a room. We had like 4 weeks to develop this first prototype. You can see it in the presentation, and we developed a simple server system, 3D models, and the code for the app at the City Lab Berlin, where we also tested the prototype. And the focus of this phase was to develop features and the infrastructure to make the first experience happen and to make experience with this system for ourselves. And at the end of this phase, we tested the app with about like 30 people. We talked to each one of them, and we collected feedback, feature requests, and some bugs and problems we had. And I want to share with you the following issues which emerged from the first prototype. So first and foremost, we used spatial audio, so which means we placed certain audio sources on certain 3D objects, and this forced people to get into certain body positions to listen to some interviews. So they had to get very close to some objects, and you can see it in this slide. So this is an early stage, and we had this 3D island, and you can see it's like 120 meter high. And in this extreme example, an audio source was placed on a very tiny figure, and people had to like crawl on the floor to listen to the interview. And this is actually very distracting for people, and it distracts them from the core experience of listening to the interviews. And this is what we actually wanted to focus about. But as we chose augmented reality, and augmented reality is a very explorative medium, we needed to find a solution which is a good way to keep them exploring and listening to the interview, but later to that. And the second thing we discovered was that we talked about the conversational system. So people were asked to have a conversation with each other if they chose to listen to some certain audio, and this was a sidetrack more or less, and people did actually like to have conversations, but they didn't have to like conversation when we asked them to have conversations. This is actually against our own design principles. A very important design principle for us is that people should not be forced to have a certain kind of behavior, but to be enabled to have a certain kind of behavior. And this is one of our key principles. So you can see this is an early stage design, and people were like asked to find each other via a sign, then they had like 3 minutes to talk to each other, and then they're done. And this is a screen overlay, which means they couldn't block it. And this is actually quite uncomfortable because people should have the opportunity to like say, okay, I don't want this to opt in or to opt out, have selection. And this is a core principles we didn't follow at all at this point. And the third learning we had is that people requested more features on the core experience. So, for example, they asked us to have a feature which enables them to remember what they already did here, because there's a lot of content placed on 3D markers, and yeah, it's just a convenient thing to remember. What some people thought of this as a gamification of the process. So this is what we learned in the first iteration, and a few months later we got into the second iteration, and this was from January to February this year. And at the beginning of February we released the installation as well, and in the forehand, we had to make hard decisions because the pandemic situation, and we decided that we cancel the conversational system at all. It was a very hard decision because we think it's in the core experience of theater that people can talk to each other and have a social situation, and this is actually against the social situation. But therefore, we wanted to focus on the main experience and get this the main experience as clear as possible. And taught you about the problem of having a certain kind of distance to a spatial audio. And this is actually, we came up with a very simple solution to make this problem disappear. So we thought, why not having a camera overlay, so an UI interface which pretends to be like a camera, which is pointing on audio sources. So if people were pointing on certain kind of interest, which means there is an audio source placed, they could like press a UI button. You can see it on the bottom of the interface, on the bottom of the picture. And if they do so, the audio source is going to be played. So this is actually good because people could still explore the 3D content. They could go around, but had the opportunity to activate and deactivate the audio source, and just they could go into their own body positions and didn't have the problems of not going to have good concentration on the interview at all. So the second feature we wanted to implement was a feature that helped people remembering what they already had seen or heard. And this feature is actually quite simple because we thought of color as memory, and which means the 3D objects are black and white in the first place. And if they take a picture, the object is going to get colored. And so the whole island is colored when they are finished, and they know, okay, this is what they are finished. Yep. And so Susanne is going to wrap it up with some important design aspects, just a short overview which we wanted to share.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, you just heard some brief reflections, and we just want to wrap it up for you and give you our best learning. So to us, the conversation with the audience is so important, so that we have learned also in such experiences to give as much control as possible to the users, because that's what makes an interactive experience really happening. And also don't control the behavior, but enable it. So what we think user-centered design is also important in the artistic work, because we don't want to know we don't know in advance how our users will react, And that's the important thing for us, and to give them the freedom to find it out by themselves. And also during the production, try to work in iterations. It is necessary to consider each phase as a further development and not as the closing of a project, because there's always things happening. And so also work with continuous integration, continue to develop even after the release. That's something we have learned. And for us, this was only possible thanks to a process-oriented funding. So therefore, we were able to divide the development process in different phases to design it according to our needs, and so that we could work in phases and with the most recent knowledge. So that's just it's a tip we have tried to look and find or enable process-orientated funding if these kind of works are supposed to really work with the audience. Yeah, so maybe the last slide. Thank you very much that we could be here. And yeah. You can find further information on the trailer and everything on our website, because this was only a brief insight.
Thank you so much, Ricarda and Susanna. I think in your way of working, we see very much the influences of software development here, which is really great. We'll speak later about that. I think that's very valuable for our audiences. Our next speaker, he's Ben Carlin, is a creative director at Megaverse, as well as being part of the Royal Shakespeare Digital Cohort and the Policy and Evidence Center Industry Champion in the VR and AR sector. Ben has a first-class degree in drama from Kingston University and is an associate lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University in digital media arts and production. Ben has over 6 years of experience as creative producer for VR and AR projects, and often is a public speaker at leading industry events. He unfortunately cannot be with us today, which is really pity, but he was so kind to send us a pre-recorded video of his talk. There will be, in this talk, he will present one case study of a virtual reality theater production that utilizes VR headsets. The name is Frankenstein, and I think that is a really great idea. The audience goes inside the brain of the monster. However, there is more than our time here allows. This video was 30 minutes long. His talk is much longer than we can show you. And he will also present a second case study. But as we don't have so much time here in this live stream, we very warmly invite you to go on the website of the Play On Network, where you can find the whole length video of 30 minutes and hear and see also about the second case study, which is called Flood. But we will hear now about Frankenstein, and I'm really happy that he sent this video.
Hello everyone, I'm Ben from Megaverse. We're an interactive studio that are based in Sheffield, and we make work that combines immersive technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality glasses, all the realities with storytelling to create sort of platform native experiences. We've got a particular focus on user agency. So all of our work, the audience will sort of be interacting with the experience in some degree. So they're never sort of just completely passive. There's some sort of interaction with everything that we do. The two pieces that I want to talk about today are, one of them is called Frankenstein and the other is called Flood. Now, Frankenstein was made in collaboration with the National Youth Theatre, and it was put on in 2018. And the image that you can see in front of you at the moment is, from that production where we had 230 audience members per night going inside the brain of Mary Shelley's monster. And yeah, it ran for a whole month at Southwark Playhouse in London. And, you know, to be honest, when National Youth Theatre sort of first approached us about sort of integrating VR into an actual live theatre show, we were a little bit apprehensive because we were like, how's this going to work? You know, that many headsets, there's so many logistical things to sort of consider with doing something like that. But they were really keen on it, and we just made sure that we were involved very early on in those creative discussions with the writer and the director, just to make sure that the VR element was really sort of tied in to the vernacular of the play. And as you can see, sort of in this image, you've got Frankenstein with the headset on, and the kind of Frankenstein's monster there, which in this version is an artificially intelligent robot. So what we did was, the headset was sort of part of the story world of the piece. It wasn't just, the last thing that we wanted to do was be like, and now put on your 3D glasses, and everyone gets out their 3D, headsets, and it just feels really cheap and gimmicky. So in this particular production, Frankenstein trains the robot about the human world through VR. So the headset's very much part of the play. So it's not the first time you see them when you just put them on. So there were two different parts to the VR section of Frankenstein. The first part was the going to the Arctic. The director was really keen on this idea of, what can you do in VR that you can't do in the physical auditorium, where you're watching the play. And one of the things was, let's transport them to the Arctic, which is the backdrop for Frankenstein. So that's what we did. It was, pretty good gig for myself, my business partner, John. We went to Greenland, and with our 360 stereoscopic camera, and we just captured loads and loads of footage of all the icebergs. And, stereoscopic. So we tried to get as close to the ice as we could to really get that 3D effect for the audience members. They also wanted to capture the monster being spotted on the ice, because that's again part of the original sort of novel, and that involved me having to dress up as if I was the monster in the distance, and I had about 3 costume changes, and it, as you can imagine, did get quite cold. So the first section of this VR experience was in the Arctic, and that's what the audience members saw in the headset. The second section, again, it was thinking, okay, what does VR offer differently that you wouldn't be able to do, by just watching on the stage? And it's that sense of immersion and stepping inside the shoes of, in this case, the monster. So the writer and director sort of, thought it would be a really interesting experience to show the perspective of this AI monster, so see the world through their eyes. So we kind of made this whole CGI kind of 3D environment that represented the inner workings of the monster's brain. So this first bit is like the synapses firing, and you kind of get thrown into this, and it's sort of all moving, and it's all kind of pretty cool. And then one of the things was about how an AI might interpret emotions. And what we did was all of the actors, we recorded different facial expressions using the front-facing camera on the iPhone, because you can do basic motion capture with that. And then we put it all together, and as you can see, you can sort of see how the emotions came across there. And you can sort of see that purple box, which we carried through into this last section as well, which it was like you saw this scene in the play happen in real time, and then in the headset you see a replay of that, of what how the monster kind of interpreted that scene. And we were kind of inspired by how smart cars sort of see the world through LiDAR scanning, and how they always have little boxes around objects and stuff. So we kind of gave the user sort of chance to sort of see the world through the monster's eyes, essentially. The actual whole VR section was only about 8-9 minutes long in total. And it came in the second half of the experience. Just to quickly show you, so to have 230 headsets, it was quite logistically challenging. And actually, it was more like 300 headsets because we had to have some for redundancy. But we had about 4 to 6 backstage people that were just dedicated to dealing with headsets. So charging, cleaning, calibrating, there was a lot of things, and it was like quite a slick operation, and they were just dedicated to that. And then this is kind of, we also trained up the actors as well. So if the headset hadn't triggered, someone would raise their hand and we'd instantly give them a new headset. And within a minute, like pretty much every night, everyone was in the experience, in the VR kind of part. And surprisingly, it went really smoothly. We out of all the things that could go wrong, we did pretty well with it. It ran for a month, and it was pretty successful. And I mean, I think the reason why it was successful was because that onboarding and offboarding was so well integrated into the experience. So in half time, the audience all left, to go and get a drink. Then the VR team would move in and put a headset down below each person's chair. But because it was in traverse, they had to be calibrated, each way. And then obviously as soon as the show ended, get them all back on charge, because especially if there was a matinee, it had to be a matinee and an evening performance, it had to be very, very efficient. There was a lovely quote that we had from the production from Zilla Watson, who was the BBC VR commissioning editor, and she said, "The way that National Youth Theatre incorporated virtual reality into Frankenstein was an extraordinary, creative and technological feat. VR transported a 19th century novel firmly into the 21st century, provoking deep thoughts about machines and intelligence."
Yeah, very sorry for the abrupt ending here. As I said earlier, you're very warmly invited to see the second half of this pre-recorded talk on our website. And another advice here, because our Reaction Link platform is a little bit shaky at the moment, a little bit unstable. So our recommendation would be to see the stream on our website. And if you wish to send us questions, which I really hope you do, because you can ask us everything what's on your mind. I'm improvising right now. I prepared this here. So this is the email address you can send us your questions to, so please do so if you don't succeed on Reaction Link, on the Reaction Link platform. I'll leave that here for a second. Okay, so the next and unfortunately already final speaker of this morning is doing a very, very interesting endeavor in virtual reality. When I first met him, he appeared quite unusual. He had the avatar of a dog, so not a fox like Dirk earlier, but a dog. We all were actually digital avatars, meeting each other on a social virtual reality network called HOPE2 and talking through our headsets and microphones. It was fun, but I'm nevertheless very happy to finally, and actually for the first time, seeing his real face. Jason is an award-winning cross-platform writer, producer, and director with over 25 years of experience working in the film, theater, television, and XR industry. Today, he will talk about his show, The Meta Movie Presents Alien Rescue. Their motto, "You don't watch this movie, you'll live it." And it is indeed not a movie at all, I can say from my own experience. It is a gamified live performance in virtual reality with a full cast of actors and several players. Did you notice? We've come full circle this morning, as it is indeed one of those live theater game shows that Antonia talked about earlier. So a very warm welcome, Jason. Please share your adventures. And I know it's very early for you in the morning because you're from the US.
Thank you so much for having me here. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Perfect.
Great. And will you just confirm that you can see my screen? Great, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. Again, my name is Jason Moore. I'm not a theater maker. I consider myself more of a filmmaker. And this project tries to combine a lot of different elements. I can speak on this subject quite a bit, and so I have some prepared notes to keep me on my time, so I don't want to run out of my time. So I will begin my presentation now. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to not just watch a movie, but to experience it from inside the world of the story? If you're anything like me, the answer is yes. I have personally had that desire since I was 11 years old, watching Star Wars for the first time. I desperately wanted to go on the adventures of Luke, Han, and Leia. I wanted to live the movie, not just watch it. The Metamovie Project is my way of fulfilling that lifelong dream. A metamovie combines aspects of immersive virtual reality, traditional cinematic storytelling, live theater, video games, and role-playing in order to give audiences an experience like nothing they've ever had before. In a metamovie, you use VR equipment to step inside a film. You play a character, but you don't have to memorize any lines. 5 professional actors connecting with VR equipment in their homes and offices do all the heavy lifting. This work is the result of 4 years of research and experimentation from a team of independent writers, directors, and VR artists and technicians, and the result is the Metamovie Project. The Metamovie Project is built on a foundation of research and experimentation. The goals are to discover best practices for narrative-driven live virtual reality experiences. Immersion, presence, agency, emotional experiences, and suspension of disbelief are some of the core ideas that I explore. Starting in 2017, I have written, produced, and directed several experimental performances on several social VR platforms, with each new production iterating on lessons learned from the previous ones. Currently, I am running Alien Rescue, a live 70-minute interactive and immersive VR performance where audiences freely interact with the fictional characters in a shared storytelling experience. In Alien Rescue, you've been hired by a band of alien rights activists to help rescue the Zabanajor, a rare and noble alien creature being held captive at the secretive Kelosite research facility. Set during a decades-long war between clashing civilizations, Alien Rescue is both an exciting sci-fi adventure and a challenging ideological debate about vivisection and animal rights. In order to allow audiences to live the movie instead of just watching, Alien Rescue features 2 levels of audience interaction, 1 main hero audience member and 15 sidekicks. The hero is the star, and the story unfolds around them, reacting to their choices and bending to their will. Their 15 sidekicks go along for the ride as silent but active helpers, flying around the scene and taking in the story from any view they like. Virtual reality technology allows us to immerse our audience inside this story world. Wearing a head-mounted display and moving through our massive and highly detailed computer-generated movie sets, you feel as if you are actually there, inside the Alien Rescue universe. You navigate through the massive Black Hawk spaceship, measuring hundreds of yards wide and tall, with over 20 interior rooms. Once inside the Kelosite research facility, you explore 6 vast areas, each one impeccably designed in order to captivate and delight. A metamovie, as you might guess, is rooted in a deep appreciation for cinema. The script for Alien Rescue seems, at first glance, to resemble a typical science fiction film. We use cinematic storytelling concepts like the hero's journey, and we look closely at things that movies do particularly well. For example, taking audiences to places and on physical journeys. Our audiences in Alien Rescue never sit still. They teleport from their ship, trek across a planet, and explore the deep levels of the lab layer by layer. Another influence on this project is live theater, and live actors are a crucial component of what we do. In fact, utilizing live actors was the first important decision I made when hypothesizing around how to actually bring audiences inside a story world. Most traditional VR narratives use pre-recorded performances and animated characters that give us one-way audience interactions. Personally, I have never been able to suspend my disbelief when engaging with these types of characters in a VR environment. My senses might have been delighted and immersed in a gorgeous computer-generated scene, but the minute I realized that the characters of the story did not actually acknowledge my presence, the spell was broken. I was unable to suspend any disbelief as long as it was obvious that the characters and I shared a physical space, but I was invisible to them. Live actors, it seemed to me, could alleviate this. When a group of well-rehearsed actors welcome me into their story, I begin to feel a real and legitimate emotional connection to them. Their performances feel real, This is, after all, the beauty and magic of all live theater, a strong focus on acting, character, and performance. This, in turn, facilitates the suspension of disbelief. Providing extreme agency to our audiences is perhaps the single most important aspect of the project. We tell our heroes that they can do or say anything they want within the parameters of our PG-16 rating. This is challenging and has taken several years to refine and perfect, but it is absolutely something audiences want. They have told me again and again, the more agency we have, the more engaging the experience is. So what does it take to actually provide this extreme amount of agency? Well, on the most basic level, it requires that the Alien Rescue cast to be expert improvisational actors. They must be able to listen carefully to what a hero is saying, asking, or suggesting, and immediately respond. Doing this whenever the hero asks requires the actors to have a deeply granular understanding of the script. Not only must they be able to pivot out of the structured screenplay into a spontaneous improv moment, they need to be flexible with the structure of every scene. Whereas in a typical play, we would always progress through the scene's dramatic beats in the same chronological order. In Alien Rescue, we must play these beats out of order because of something that the hero has said or done will often disrupt the pattern. We've played scenes entirely in reverse so as to bend to the impulses of a hero. This type of narrative flexibility is something I've learned from game design, where players also demand extreme agency and game designers structure gameplay to be equally flexible. Agency also involves giving audiences choices and options, like a choose-your-own-adventure book or role-playing video game, or with interactivity between the player and the game. We use principles like the string of pearls theory in order to give audiences choices while steering them back to the main storyline so we can retain our story structure. We also utilize branching storylines. Of course, in a live performance, it's a bit more complicated. All of the actors in Alien Rescue must memorize these story branches. We currently have 6 different endings. And whenever the hero makes an important choice, the entire cast must be perfectly in sync in order to execute that maneuver. And to make things even more interesting, I have several smaller if-then scenarios, which trigger mini scenes and shorter moments, almost like Easter eggs. For example, the first time the hero encounters a loose creature in the lab, they will either let it go or perhaps shoot and kill it with their gun. Depending on that choice, it will then trigger some specific action in another scene deeper in the story. All of these story branches give the hero a sense of having real control over their experience, something that feels extremely satisfying to them. For the cast and crew, it requires a lot of rehearsal and a commitment to the process. The last major influence on a meta movie is role-playing, like Dungeons and Dragons and play acting games or activities. In fact, a core premise of a meta movie is that there is no real audience. Rather, it's a collective, shared storytelling experience. Our heroes are the only audience members who actually talk, so they are doing most of the role-playing, but even our little iBots flying silently through the scene, they're role-playing too. Of course, only a small percentage of our audiences has experience with formal role-playing, but everyone, every day, does some form of role-play in their own lives. We send our heroes some hints and tips about their character in advance of the performance in the form of a mission briefing document. We ask our heroes to invent a few facts about their character, and we give them the chance to create as much or as little backstory as they like. Since no two heroes are alike, we spend time and energy diagnosing hero behavior in the early part of the performance so we can give them the type and amount of agency they want. Some heroes are full-blown thespians, owning the stage and taking full control of every scene. Others wait for cues and need us to nudge them along. So, does it actually work? Do audiences enjoy trading a passive story watching experience for something totally immersive and highly interactive? Well, yes, indeed they do. At the 2 festivals we have been a part of, Venice and Raindance, the feedback has been very encouraging. It seems I'm not the only one with the dream of being inside a movie. And this is not just a validation of all the hard work we've put in, it's also a validation of this new hybrid form of storytelling. So in conclusion, thank you for allowing me to share my work and my experiences over the last 4 years of this project. If you have VR or even just a regular PC, you're invited to join us at an upcoming live performance. Our ticket prices are quite reasonable, and we even offer private group shows. In this manner, perhaps you and a friend can discover a whole new way to go into a movie together. Thank you.
I see you have woken from cryostasis. Welcome to the Black Hawk, the Kelesite Research Facility. Your mission. The team is waiting. These iBots will accompany you to keep you safe. Or perhaps they'll get you killed. They are unpredictable.
Well, look who's here. How do we even know we can trust him?
I vouch for him, Baxter.
Hey, I told you, I go by Axe now.
Shut up. The Zabanager has the most toxic blood in the galaxy, and these bastards are weaponizing her. We can't let that happen. Everyone split up. Let's see what we can find.
Please, I'm innocent. Let me go.
He's lying.
Your call.
Jason. I already booked my ticket, I think, for May, so I'm really excited to see what will happen. Again, to our audience, because our platform reaction link is a little bit shaky, you can send us your questions here on to this email. Here it is. So please go ahead if you have anything in mind. Maybe, Jason, we stay for a moment with you. And for our audience, we are like 20 minutes over time. So if you just want to grab your coffee and join us for another 20 minutes for the panel discussion, that would be great. Jason, a very practical question that came here is it, I think I can already answer that, but maybe you can dig a little bit deeper in it. Is it possible to experience your shows with an own headset at home? And if so, how?
Yes. Our show runs on the SocialVR metaverse platform Neos VR, which is a free application that you can download from the Steam store. And indeed, our project is designed to be experienced in your own home. So you download Neos, you go to our website to buy a ticket, and using your PC VR, unfortunately, we are not developed for the Quest, so it does require PC VR, but we also offer a desktop experience for those of us who don't actually have VR. If you just have some headphones and a little microphone, you can actually do Alien Rescue in desktop.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's open the panel, and my first question would go to Tina, because I think your vision and the vision of Jason and his metaverse are, I think, come closest to anything like a metaverse. How do you see your Elektrotheater in the future? Are you still working on it? And that is a question actually from the audience. Is there a website or anything how we can find that online?
Yes, the Elektrotheater is a learning experience, I think, because it is so, it works a bit differently for the audience and the players than an analog theater show does. And we don't have, I think we don't have customs, experience customs to experience it. When you go into the theater, you know what's expected of you. You give your jacket to the people who work there. You don't take drinks into the space and all that. And in digital spaces, that is not a practice. And so we're still finding out how we behave there, what is expected of us, what is rude and what is not rude, and how the actors are acting in there. So for us, it is a learning experience how to kind of navigate those spaces. And I think this is really quite important. So we are working on it, and we are planning to host regular shows within the infrastructure of Elektrotheater, because we kind of need to find out and explore these kind of structures. And I think it's really interesting that Jason is docking onto an already existing platform, because that's an alternative to kind of eke out space, artistic space, in something that is maybe not built with that kind of experience in mind, but it's working there nonetheless.
Yeah, the same maybe as a little bridge to Antonio, who we had earlier as keynote speaker. His performances are on VR chat and other existing platforms. So there are quite many platforms in the meta, well, in the at for now so-called metaverse. I also think maybe another question to Jason, because it just fits very well, and then we go on to the other panelists. There was a question from the audience asking you that she or her, they know that you've done several iterations, several versions of your meta movie, and the question was if you can share something that you learned while doing all these versions. You said you worked on it for 4 years.
I would say the biggest learning curve has been the diagnosing of audience desires around agency. We started the process kind of thinking that perhaps audiences would want quite a bit of agency, but not exactly sure how much they would want. So with each iteration, we gave our audiences a little bit more power, a little bit more authority, a little bit more control. And it's just fascinating that as much as we give, they want more and more and more. And so I think that some of the most interesting learning moments I've had is finding people who might seem shy and introverted in the first few minutes of a show, and then suddenly they are role-playing like a classic thespian. And it's quite interesting to discover what unlocks that ability within an audience member. You know, role-playing happens usually in small groups, in game-playing environments. But when we bring a very large group of people together and we ask them all to role-play at the same time, they tend to feed off each other, and the energy becomes quite contagious. And so I think this is something that we continue to really interrogate and investigate, is what degree of agency do audiences want? How far will they go? What does it take to unlock that behavior? So I think those are the core questions that we're still asking on the MetaMovie project.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting, especially that aspect of collaboration and guidance at one end and freedom at the other end. Some dimension that Susanna and Ricardo told us a little bit about their design principles, while you, Jason, you also guide your audience, or well, your users, your players, your heroes very well through the experience. Susanna and Ricardo told us that they appreciate freedom and the choice of the audience can do very much. So my question to Susanna and Ricardo would be, and that's actually also from the audience, how do you deal with the effects of overwhelming the user with too many options, with maybe too much freedom? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of control options?
Well, actually, we try to keep it simple. This is the answer. We try to keep even the system so simple that you aren't overwhelmed by it, so you can process it. And we're trying to make this simple system accessible for the audience and have them control over the most important aspects. Yeah.
Susanna, do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe in addition, it's also a question of timing, I think, because like in this installation, they were always 4 up to 6 people together, but they could choose their own timing. They could choose how long they would take to experience things, or how much they wanted to explore and search for things. So this is something where they had a freedom, and they could, like, sometimes there are people who are a bit more shy, or who some have this gaming feeling and they want to find everything and take a long time. So yeah, I think this is a good thing to keep it simple, but give them a framework to cope with.
And short to guidance, we guide the people to in terms of, we talk to them in the forehand. We are there, people from our teams are there, and we try to keep them as warm as possible and as welcoming as possible. So yeah, this is actually just
as easy as that, right? Let's stay a little bit in this collaboration technology dimension right now, because with Lucy here, we have somebody who's an expert in interactive storytelling, or who became an expert in interactive storytelling, I think, over the last 2 years, even though you're not doing virtual augmented reality. But likewise, you probably will have the same questions in mind. How much agency can you give your audiences? Any learnings from that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think the thing that's really interesting about, that we've found with interactivity and that, a lot of what we're working with is quite low, like I said, quite low tech, quite hacky ways of interaction and immersion and bringing people into worlds. So we've done some of our shows that I didn't touch on in the presentation have involved posting people packages that they maybe unwrap and unfold and interact with, or posting them something that they have to color in, and QR codes that they scan, or filmed branching video that you have to scan a QR code within the video, and then that takes you to a live call with an actor. And and I think one of the things that we see is an appetite for that interactivity and for that immersion in worlds. But actually, we found, like, surprisingly, and we shouldn't have been surprised by this, but that actually our digital audience is slightly older than our analog audience were. And there's a real presumption when you go into digital work, but this is for young people, this is for people who do, VR and AR all the time. But, there are, retired people, older people who have worked on computers for most of their lives, who are really receptive to interacting with technology, who are on their iPads and on their computers all the time, connecting with family and doing video calls. So actually, there's people who maybe aren't quite ready for really complicated, or not necessarily complicated, but really, maybe are a bit scared to try VR. And actually, we're almost like the gateway drug. Actually, these little interactions, these moments where it's just an interactive website, or it's interactive video, or it's a simple choice, or it's interacting with a QR code, and then it builds confidence in an audience. And then we can start to pull them into loads of different ways that we can immerse people in stories in the future.
That actually is a very interesting question, the question about the audiences. These last 2 years for me personally were really great, because I have a little baby at home, and so I can go to the theater right now, which I couldn't otherwise, or not that long at least. So like you said, reaching new audiences would be really great. And that's also a question our audience had to Philip and Sebastian. Did you see that you reached new audiences? Were that more that classical theater visitors who went also to digital productions? Could you reach other people? Could you reach other generations, or maybe whole other target groups?
Yeah, we definitely did. I think it was even at the start, we started with this first edition, and we were trending topic in Germany and Austria, beating Corona as a topic in May 2020, at least for some hours. So that must have been other people than those who are usually our crowd. And with the Twitter radio theater, we reached something like some 200,000 listeners that night. So not all of them are our usual audiences, definitely. And there's a certain community building around these theater events, and they may consist of old Burgtheater heads and newcomers as well. And do these events pay back on our analog performances? We don't know that well, to be honest, because we have no means of counting them. But I think, or we're pretty certain that the Christmas miniseries paid into the To Be a Machine series that started right after that. And so, yes, there are interactions between different target groups or different groups of the community. Of course, you would have to have at least an imagination of what it is like to go into a theater.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to measure, but it does actually, in a very simple way. Anna and I developed a format, theater meets museum, where you have actors in the museum, and that does pay back quite quickly. When you link it to performances, then more people come, and it is also about communication with the audience, that you actually, because in Twitter theater, the line between participants and audience is kind of withdrawn, and that's the nice thing, that everybody acts together. And so it is actually more about building community spirit than about like reaching target groups. And the other thing, and I think Lucy mentioned that, people from all over the German-speaking world, I mean, we have the language barrier, but all over the German-speaking world can participate in these things and also get to know the theater, and then think, oh yeah, this might be something I want to see in reality. This is something which I consume like that. And I think this kind of also building larger communities is quite important for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I say something about agency too? Because we don't have an outcome of the stories or an ending of the stories in mind when we start. So the agency is total. It's not like choosing what yes or no, but the whole thing is created by the people who participate in it. So because that's the tricky thing about participation. It was mentioned a lot before, that that you always try to guide what people what you want people to do in the end. And as we do that in analog theater in a big way, we sort of decided to let a lot more loose in this format.
That is very interesting. We can dig a little bit more into that. But first, go back to we go back to a previous question with the audience. How you target new audiences? Do you see a pushback to theater? Tina, how is it with the State Theatre of Augsburg? I think you did quite some experiments on this question, right?
Yes, and I think we noticed that it's not quite true that when you have cutting-edge technology, then younger people will automatically come, because our audience in the VR is as old and as young as the audience that comes to our theater. We have 80-year-old people watching VR pieces, and that's a common sight. So all people of all ages are curious. And I think what's really, really important is that all the work in digital spaces is not designed as a means for an end, and this end is supposedly that the people come back to the analog spaces, because it's not. It's an art form in itself, and the piece can be in the digital realm, it can be in the physical theater, but it's not an add-on, because it's a work of art in itself. And I think that's very important, and that's what the Burgtheater is doing, and that's what Out of the Box is doing. And also what Lucy is doing, I think, to kind of create pieces that work and build up a community that can exist in itself, and be a larger community. Because I can participate in the Burgtheater's Twitter theater thing without ever going there, and without ever wanting to go there because it's far away, or because I just can't. And this is something that makes it really interesting, that you have a different kind of community that's building around, and that's not divided by a generational gap, which I think is really, really nice, because people of all ages are as curious about those things more than we imagine.
Lucy is nodding. Do you want to add something?
No, just very much agree with all of that. And this kind of community, you know, like for us, it's not about, you know, going back to analog and going back to in-person stuff, because the community that we're growing is global. And, you know, like this is people all around the world who can see the benefits and can gain from, you know, from different types of digital experiences. And just that feeling of community when you get to the end of a show and then people unmute themselves and start chatting and go, oh, I'm in Paris, oh, I'm in Zambia, oh, I'm in Istanbul. Like that's just magic and so exciting.
Yeah, that's something I really enjoyed at Jason's platform as well, because then I could play with somebody from Canada, from New Zealand, from I don't know where in the world. It was really great. Speaking of,
may I just add to this, because there's also one thing for us in Twitter theater and other formats. It's quite important that the hierarchy that you experience in analog theater does not exist, and I think this is something. And it's not about like always going back to the real thing, the analog, but it is something that I think also the analog theater and the community there can learn, that you don't have to fear losing this hierarchy. It can be easy accessible. And this is something which I enjoy a lot in these formats. And I truly understand the role of theater, also from listening to Tina and Lucy. It's a lot about community building, and we do this with different means. And in the digital space, we experience a kind of a community that is very emancipated. And I think this is something we can take back into normal, in quotation marks, normal theater practices.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for that. And you saw, to the other speakers, you saw how Philip raised his little Zoom hand. You can do so as well if you want to add something always. Yeah, Susanne does so, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think it's interesting also when talking about these disruptions which happened on the digital space in the last years, that there has been going on before the pandemic a lot, also in the performing arts. And I think what is for us really important is to think about this artistic work as maybe post-digital works. So it's not only analog or digital, it's something in between. And it's important to have the physical room and the technology, at least for us, but also to give, like when talking about hierarchies, like really give the audience some power. And I think there are really interesting works in also, especially in the independent performing arts scene, where participation and enabling of the audience has been a core element, and where digital mindset is a lot more in the room, also if there's no technology, but it's being able to participate and to give the audience like digital communication skills, even if it's analog.
Yeah, great. Speaking of technology, I'm getting a lot of technical questions here. One would go to Tina. Maybe you can say us very, very short. If you use so many VR headsets, like 200 or 300, how do you make sure that Wi-Fi signal is strong enough to keep connected so many devices at the same time? And do you ask your audience to switch off their phones? Do you use cables? How do you do that, like really practically?
We always ask audiences to turn off their phones. That's a common theater practice in Germany. But we use very strong Wi-Fi routers. We have, I think for 500 headsets, we have 5 or 6 in the room. And we trigger the headsets centrally via laptop and the software, and that works beautifully. We have no problem with over 500 at the same time. It's technology that's really, really working.
Oh, fantastic to hear. Jason, also a technical question to you. First, there was one question about ticketing, where you can buy tickets, and which roles people like a hero and sidekick and so on. And the second one is about this, let's say this conflict, if you can say, between story and technology. So if I understood it correctly, the question is, how do you implement the story and not cover it with technology, so it's not disturbed with technology? And that's a question I want to ask you all all the others as well. So please raise your hand if you want to add something. Yeah, how do you flourish the story?
Thank you. In terms of ticketing, you can visit the metamovie.com to find tickets for our performances. We're running essentially every weekend, and we have tickets available for the hero role as well as the sidekick role. In fact, as part of our ongoing experimentation, we've started experimenting with 2 heroes instead of 1, and those experiences have been so much fun to see 2 friends come in and kind of co-author the work. It's been really, really exciting. So those tickets are available. We also sell private shows for groups of people. We've seen many groups of people come in and just buy the whole show out. And that's always a lot of fun too. So the metamovie.com, and we are running, like I said, on most weekends, you can come find us in the metaverse. In terms of technology and the story, I mean, you cannot get away from technology when you are immersed in virtual reality. So that technology does certainly both lend us many opportunities, and also prevents and also kind of introduces many obstacles as well. And that can be quite frustrating to audience members and to the performers in the cast alike. We're constantly kind of troubleshooting our VR workspaces and workflows, and we certainly have our fair share of hiccups and glitches that go along with trying to kind of leverage this VR equipment to really push the boundaries of what can be done on a live SocialVR metaverse. But we find that once that our audiences and our cast and our crew get settled in, the technology kind of steps out of the way. You tend to kind of forget a little bit that you're wearing this giant box on your head. And hopefully, if we're doing our job correctly, you start to kind of have that sensation of the reality slipping away and being enveloped in the story. And of course, that's what the actors are all about. The actors are really the ones who are pulling our audiences in. And by the 30-40 minute mark, I think we've all kind of forgotten that we're wearing our VR headsets, and we are just on the mission trying to survive, frankly.
Yeah, great. So then in reality, I think I'm interested in your view on this question. What do you think? What contents are especially suitable for augmented reality projects?
I think every content is suitable. So I don't think there are any boundaries to content. So you could either tell stories with branching storytelling like Jason, or you can just do some like play stuff. So or you can interact with animations. You can interact with the city. So I don't think there's any boundary at all.
Okay, thank you. I still have 2 questions for you, because we are already running way over time. Please excuse our audience, but I think the panel discussion right now is very interesting, and we have all these amazing speakers. So I would like to continue for, let's say, 5 more minutes. And my second last question is also from the audience, and I don't know if you want to speak about it publicly, but the question is if you can share something about the budgets you needed to create your show, in order so that people here, the audience, the theater makers, the creators can have an idea of how much to invest to create something similar. Maybe you can just say 1 sentence, each of you, about your specific projections and those budgets. Tina, do you want to start?
Yes, we get that question quite a lot, usually combined with the question if the shows are paying for themselves, if they are getting the money back that we invested. And German theater scene is rather peculiar because the state and communal theaters, they are publicly funded. And in terms of that, we could not have done the Elektrotheater without a very, very generous grant from the Kulturstiftung des Bundes. So that would not have been in our budget.
Can you share how much that was?
We received a grant of 200,000 euros for 1 year. Okay, and but the 360-degree video performances, that is quite something that could fit in a budget that is akin to medium-sized or even little drama productions for us, whereas the big opera show was really something that was a substantial investment. Yeah, so if you're doing infrastructure, if you're doing SocialVR infrastructure, that's quite a lot of development costs, yes.
Yes, Jason, do you want to say one sentence about your budget?
Yeah, it's zero. I mean, as an American, the funding for projects like mine here in the U.S. is not very available. I ran a Kickstarter in 2019 and raised $10,000. I spent that in about 6 months. I've probably spent another $10,000 or $15,000 of my own money out of pocket. But mostly this project is done on a volunteer basis. Most of the artists and technicians involved are excited about the process and the research. And so we are a very independent project with very small budget.
Wow, that is impressive. And I can only say for years and years how grateful I am to pioneers who really experiment on those platforms. Susanna, Ricardo, your independent group as well. How much is your budget?
I have to talk about money, so happy to answer. No, I think what you have to know is that we had like a cross-orientated funding, which was especially due to COVID-19. There was a Neustart, a new funding which allowed to have processes, and we also had funding from the lower state Saxony. And we had we were 6 people at the total for the research as well. All of them worked between 2 months and 6 months. And we had for the research, the production, and also 3 shows in 3 different cities, around about 80,000 euros, which is basically not very much, but it is compared to other productions a little bit more than usually. Like usually these productions are being made by only 50,000 euros, I think. And also we paid ourselves as artists and not, of course, as software developers, even though we have this, these experiences in our team.
Wow, yeah, thank you. Well done. Lucy, what are your budgets, for example, of the video branching show that seems one of the most elaborated, I think, that you presented? Can you talk about
so for us, like nearly all our budget actually goes into our performers. So, you know, our budget for Romeo and Juliet, I think, was about £25,000 in sterling. But that is largely, that's just performers, that's just rehearsal time. You know, the software that we were using for it was nominal. I think it was, you know, it was hardly anything. And a lot of the software and the tech we're using, the AI we've used, the branching video we use, they're pretty accessible tools for starting to play and see what you can create. And for us, we found that our budgets are actually generally, we can produce work faster because we don't have the time scales involved in building big sets. They're generally a bit cheaper because when we're doing analog shows, we have to pay, we don't have a venue, so we have to spend a lot of money on hiring theatres, or even a lot of our non-theatre spaces. There's a higher charge involved, and then there's a whole front of house infrastructure and front of house personnel that are needed to support them and training for that. So actually we generally find that the digital work for us is cheaper and faster to make than our analog shows.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, later on we present some hands-on workshops, and a lot of those 4 workshops also give you an idea which tools you can use for free or for less money. So it's really it's really great to attend one of those workshops when you're interested in free tools and how to use already existing tools, not having to build your own. Philip and Sebastian, can you tell us something about the budget, for example, of the Twitter show that we see tonight? Oh, that we do tonight, we do it ourselves, right?
Not really, because we, to be honest, we have no budget. It's a lot of free time, but we are in a running theater. We are all on contract there, and we have a very, very passionate social media, internet person, Anne Aschenbrenner. So it's a lot about like personal investment, but maybe that's true for most of German-speaking theaters, that Corona crisis actually helped theaters to think like, oh, we need to do something in this realm. While before it was more like, no, we don't need that. We are theater. We stand for ourselves. We don't. So there has been like a paradigm change, but the budget is not according to a normal production in our theater. Yeah, and it's also the actors who participate just because they like to, and because it's enjoyable for them and also exciting. Yeah,
we exploit the creativity of everyone. So we don't have production costs.
While we are under contract in a theater, so yeah, it's easier for us, of course. Yeah.
Thank you for that insight. Well, we unfortunately came to an end of this panel discussion, and I would really love to continue. There's one question I want to ask you all, and please answer only with one, max 2 words, because the name of the conference is HOPE. And if you think about your creative future, about your creative mind doing immersive storytelling, digital storytelling, what's your hope for the future? Starting with Jason.
Knowledge.
Dina.
Other exploration.
Susanna and Ricardo.
Sharing.
What did you say?
I agree with sharing.
Sharing. Lucy?
I'll say joy.
And Sebastian and Philip?
I would say togetherness.
Yeah, creating theater together, yeah.
That are wonderful final words. Yeah. That's
three, Philip only had one.
Oh, yeah. Together we have each 2. Thank you so much for this.
Absolutely fine. Thank you so much. That was really a joy speaking with all of you. A real pleasure.